Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Better Debt. I'm Josh, the founder and CEO of Indebted, and I'm joined by Paul, the founder and CEO of Receive. Paul, nice to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, maybe just to set a bit of context for the audience, who are you? Who's Receive? What do you guys do? Story of the business. Let's kick off there.
Sure. Happy to give the background. So as you said, Paul Jozefak's my name. I'm one of the two founders. So I actually started Receive together with Michael Buckus here in Germany. And Michael and I have been working together for like 14 years at this point. So he and I actually were running the innovation arm of a large German retailer. And that's kind of where I guess like the backstory of Receive begins. We had actually went to work there to help that business primarily drive the growth of their collection subsidiary called EOS. And so we basically, both Michael and I have venture capital backgrounds, and they brought us in to kind of drive the innovation of what was really working well for the group. And so what they actually wanted to do is invest in their strengths versus their weaknesses. And that subsidiary of like the 130 subsidiaries drove all the profit of this group. And that's where one of the previous companies that Michael and I built kind of started, and which is where we kind of dove into this whole debt collection space, a company called Collect AI. And we kind of, without going into too much detail there, we kind of saw that there was a bigger opportunity in the market than what we were originally going after with Collect AI, because it was a plug-in, or let's call it a snap-on to their debt collection agency. And we saw that there was the ability to kind of address things more with a software and innovation approach. And that's what ultimately led to us actually leaving that position to start Receive. So we did that kind of the 2018, 2019 timeframe. And what we've really said is that, look, the market in the enterprise space has a need for software. You could do a lot more of the collections in-house by digitizing and automating things. Obviously, a lot of the enterprises started outsourcing everything because they didn't want the headcount and they didn't want to spend on resources. And we said, look, if they could do this with software, they could potentially do a little bit more themselves before giving it away to third-party collectors. And that was a little bit the drive for what we did. And we also saw, kind of building the previous businesses and being in the space for quite some time, that there was kind of really a need for a platform. So it wasn't about just building a software, it was taking a platform approach, because a lot of people that we talked to, and we did quite a bit of, let's say, market research and customer development before we even set out to try and sell a product. And what we heard from people is that they wanted something that really could just quasi deliver the collections processes, but also allow for a plug and play approach. And one of the other things that we also saw in the market is that there was a lot of, let's say, incumbent players, be it FICO or whatnot, Experience Power Curve, that were already embedded in a lot of these players, and ripping that out would be a huge project. Nevertheless, the people that we talked to, they wanted technology. They wanted something new, and they wanted the capabilities that we had without, having to wait for, 12 to 18 months to do a rip and replace project. So we said, look, we can start with a platform, we can layer on top of things, and we can give them what they want fairly quickly. It was a no code approach. We wanted basically the people who bought our product to not have to be IT or software specialists. We wanted the typical collections people to be able to go in and buy or receive and run the Receive platform. But we also wanted to give them the ability to kind of plug things in fairly easily, be it chatbots, now everything AI. And we even kind of foresaw this shift towards AI. Receive has been built from day one fundamentally to be driven by AI. Even our previous business was called Collect AI. We've been taking the same approach for 10 plus years in this space. And like I said, so Michael and I started in 2018, 19. We got our first year, we got two fairly large enterprise customers. So we hit the ground running. We raised venture capital over multiple rounds. So in total, we raised 16 million euro from some of the leading VCs here in Europe and the US as well. And we kind of were global from day one. So that was the other thing that we realized, that if we focus just on one market, it's going to be a little bit of a slog. So we wanted to kind of take a very global approach to what we were doing. But we said we want to be global except for the US. So we saw the US market as something that we would go address at a later date because we saw demand in the European market. We started seeing, this is pre-COVID, we started seeing demand in Southeast Asia. And then in the last couple of years, LATAM has been one of the markets where we've definitely been seeing a lot of demand. And yeah, we hit the ground running. We got the first couple of reference customers, fairly large deals, and then we, basically built the business out, and have now customers globally. We have customers in Europe, we have customers in Mexico, we have customers in the US. We're addressing the first customers in Southeast Asia. We have customers in Australia. And so, we got to the point where we felt fairly confident that what we built is kind of what the market wanted to see. But nevertheless, we also started hitting some challenges. I mean, obviously, there's still a very kind of ingrained mindset, especially in the enterprise space, of how they want to do things. Some players still always just want to outsource, and want to give it away, and here we are. I mean, that's kind of ultimately how it ended up.
That's awesome. So you brought up three really interesting parts, Paul, I think that I'd like to dive into. The platform-based approach, which is one, because I think that's close to my heart for a lot of reasons, which I'll unpack in a second. The second one is the global piece, because I think there's probably a bit of a view that it's a European-based business. And I know you've obviously got a lot of European clients, but I think what we found interesting doing diligence was the fact that there's clients in Australia, Mexico, like you mentioned. I think there's a huge opportunity in the US as well, and parts of that in the client base too. And then the third piece being the AI component. So just on the platform piece, and this is something I think is really interesting from the audience perspective to unpack, and even some of the people that I've showed the Receive platform to so far, and setting a bit of context. So the very first version of Indebted was designed to be exactly the same. So I've literally built that in the lounge room, was a platform-based approach. And the whole idea was that it wasn't enough just to provide like an email plugin. Like I like the word you used plugin before in that other context of like, it's just something that'll send an email or a text message. You actually had to augment the entire collections process. And we had this interesting challenge as well, which is there was a lot of buyers who wanted that in sort of the tier 2 space. But then to try and displace that in the enterprise scale was hard. Power curve, FICO, et cetera, in that mix. Talk through a little bit about that in terms of the why you went down building that way. And I think, again, like what a lot of people, certainly I think about our US potential clients think about is, oh yeah, we're used to like white label providers that will send the emails and text messages. Receive does way more than that. This is a potentially a platform that can augment the entire collection strategy, drag and drop strategy builder, and a whole bunch of other things. Very close colleague of mine, when I showed him your platform, is like, I've never seen anything like this. Which I thought was really, really cool. Can you just speak about that a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I think we did really, really well is that the technology that fundamentally is what the Receive platform has become is extremely powerful. I mean, Michael did a great job. Michael, my co-founder, he's also the CTO. He did a wonderful job of building a true enterprise class platform, and always keeping in the back of his mind that you want to be able to drive things with AI. And the platform approach, the other reason we call it a platform, and we kind of looked at everything the way we did, is we said it ultimately always comes down to the data. And right now, the way a lot of the technology is being used, it's maybe ingesting data and even generating data, but no one's really leveraging that data at all. And right now, if you look at, I mean, even now, 2024, if you look at the last, let's say 5, 6, 7 years, I still think the current market and our customers, and I'm sure your customers and the customers we're going to go after together, they're just catching up to where they should have been probably 10 years ago, which is the automation and digitalization is just happening, right? So they really, I mean, when people ask me, my joke, but it's not really a joke, is, what's your competition? And I say it's Excel. Right? I don't compete against other players. It's Excel who we're competing against, and that's still very much the case. And so when you show our product to people, and when we show our product to people, they're very excited about it, because what they're finally getting to do is to actually see visually what their collections value chain looks like. And if you really think about it, it starts with the messaging. So communications is absolutely essential, because without communication, there's no conversation. Without a conversation, there's no resolution. And we said, look, you have to start with the communication, and drive a conversation. That's where all the tech comes into play of, either sending a letter, sending an email, knowing whether that email was opened, sending SMSs, allowing for a white label landing page for the debtor to come and basically interact. That's where the conversation is driven. All the options that we give. And again, I will keep mentioning data. This is all quasi-generating data. You already have a lot of the data, and you're generating new data, and you need to capture it in a way that you can leverage it. And then ultimately, you can set things up very visually. It's a drag and drop tree that you basically build that sets out the strategy, but there's so many other things that you can actually do on the platform. And there's always this kind of fine line you have to walk. You don't want to be too complex. You want to make sure that the user can actually really take advantage. And they all have specific pain points that they want to address. And so when we showed our platform, they would be like, oh, I need that. That's communications. Or, oh man, I need to see exactly, who's converting on what message. Or conversely, what are they doing on the landing page? Why are they breaking off? We even have certain functionality that we always refer to that if someone breaks off on our landing page, you could trigger a flag in your call center and actually have someone pick up a phone and call that person. Right? There's all these little kind of touch points that in the past didn't really work well as part of a solution and within one platform. And you can even have the agents working in our platform. So everything is in one place, and you really could take advantage of it. And I'm giving a very long answer, but if you really think of this through, at the end of the day, when this is all working, it's digitized, it's automated, you're capturing all the data. That's where we are today. That's where the AI really kicks in. And even our platform approach is now actually almost, I don't want to say mutated, it's evolved to what we call a managed services approach. So what we're trying to say is our customers should be using our technology. They should be buying our software and using it as the enterprise. But a lot more of the actual, let's say, activity on the platform can be driven by AI. And that's because we built it the way we built it. And that's why people always tend to get that reaction to it of saying, wow, this is really exciting, because they can take those initial baby steps to then learn to walk, then learn to run, and then really to sprint. And that's kind of the platform approach we took.
Yeah. And I think that's super interesting, because just going back to my example before, one of the reasons we pivoted and it was a big pivot. Like at Series A, nearly 90% of our revenue was coming from selling the software platform. And part of the reason that I struggled and the reason we pivoted was we were building everything for everyone. And so there was this constant tension between what is the right thing to build and then the thing that the customer actually wanted. And so we just found that very challenging. I think Michael's clearly a way better CTO than I was, because the way he's architected that and the way you've got it in your platform gives you enough configurability that I think you can do what you need for all of the clients, which I think is great. And that example you mentioned of you can pull a data point out about someone falling off a landing page and then route that into a more traditional process, like hitting that on a dialer and calling that customer, I think is awesome. But I think what really made us, and we'll talk about the acquisition piece in a second, but what really excited me at this point was, as you mentioned, that managed services component, because I think for InDebted and, both the executives who've worked with us previously and the ones that are currently on my team, everyone has always talked about, will we do first party? And I've probably been the most anti first party person in the whole company, which is why we haven't done it. And it's only because I just didn't believe we could augment the Collect platform to run first party. I think that there's too much different stuff that you have to control in order to do it. And I think when, getting to know you guys and getting to see the Receive platform, is like, okay, now I can actually see it. And again, what I said still holds true. I don't think you can make Collect a first party product, but I think Receive can be. And the interesting part where that morphs in the middle is those clients will need the managed service component, which then starts to touch into, if I think about the US as an example, the compliance pieces and the quality components and everything else, which we can bring to the table. So I think the two businesses are really strong there. But I also still think there's this massive just platform approach, right? These businesses that don't outsource, don't sell, or they only sell and they don't outsource, they say, hey, well, the best I could do with Excel, like you mentioned, or Salesforce, which is another big common one. It's like, hey, we're running on Salesforce, is like these three things. And it's like, yeah, but I think that also brings us into the next part I want to talk about, which is AI. It's like, okay, well, I still think, and I'm obviously, very bullish on the product, hence why we've acquired it, but like you can do so much more in the Receive platform than you can in Salesforce, right? Like just hands down when you think about it. But I think what it really lays the foundation for, which is super interesting, is this AI piece, because I think the world between the platform and a third-party services like Collect enables this managed services, like I think with the opportunity you and I both see. But I think all of that stands to be augmented with AI, where it's like we can supercharge these agents, or we can potentially create virtual agents altogether that can do this work. And so I think that's a big piece. How do you see, and you made the comment earlier, which I thought was really apt, is like you've been thinking about AI from the beginning, and it's the previous company you worked at was called Collect AI before AI was cool. How do you think about that within the context of the business? where do you see the applicability for AI within Receive? It's already in the parts of the product already, but like, what does the roadmap look like? And talk through that a little bit.
Well, I mean, we saw it. I mean, so my background, maybe I have to take a step back to where we started. So I worked way back when in venture capital, and I also was part of the venture organization that SAP built. And this was late 90s, early 2000s when I was there getting my feet wet, for the first time really in the software space and in the enterprise software space. And I remember way back when there were like these e-commerce B2B platforms, and it was like you would get, run out of town to be the middleman. Back in those days, now it's just totally normal. I caught the wave of the CRMs as well while I was still at SAP, and saw kind of what happened in the CRM market, and where ultimately Salesforce came into the picture and became extremely successful, differentiating themselves as no software and cloud. I still remember the days when they were out, with signs, basically doing demonstrations at, I think it was Microsoft's or Oracle's user event, and they were outside, with these no software signs. It was a marketing ploy, but anyway. But that, like, I remember all of that, and then when we were talking about Collect AI with the debt collection agency of the group that we were working for, I mean, it was so evident to me that the automation and ultimately AI component would play a role. We were probably 10 years too early, to be honest. And we put AI into the name because we thought it would drive kind of a little bit of attention to the product. And it did for a while, but ultimately, when we launched Receive, you have to imagine that going into the COVID times, which was like 2020, 2021, we stopped completely talking about AI. And the reason is that there was 10 years of just absolute fluff in the market, and there was so much advertising and marketing play around the word AI and what AI technically could be, that even the buyers and like the senior executives at the customers that we went to, they didn't even want to hear it. But we believed in it fundamentally from the beginning. And like I said, that's something that Michael has done brilliantly, is that he's had the vision that first you have to take the baby steps and get these fundamental layers of the platform in place. But the real excitement is, when you actually are generating a collection score, and then you have, a quasi an AI component to all of this, and you really can take advantage of everything the platform does, and also the customers you could get the platform in front of, right? So we even were asking ourselves, how do we get past selling, to the enterprise? Why can't we go after the debt buyers and the servicers? And why not become the platform for collections? And thinking about also how all of this is done in a very different way, because there is always that human component to this, right? I mean, at some point you have to kind of call someone, and someone has to talk to someone in certain situations. You will, you will potentially automate all that at some point, but there's always going to be an interim phase where you still have that human component. And to ultimately answer your question, the AI is where it becomes extremely exciting, because it can actually take advantage of, let's say, behavioral science. It can basically predict and define next steps. It can determine things that right now are being done very manually, and a lot of people even wouldn't allow an AI to do, right? Because right now, because of, let's say, compliance and certain regulatory types of environments, and even the countries that you're in, depending on what they regulate and don't regulate, there's so much more we could be doing right now with AI, and just the customers haven't yet really, kind of dove in. And don't forget, there's also a data component of the customer data, which you have to also be very careful about, where you're actually using it as part of your AI strategy. And so that's kind of an interim answer to what you're asking, is that the way the platform is set up, you can take bits and pieces of it and automate it ultimately with AI. You can still automate it without AI, but you have the option, and you can grow into it. And that's one of the things that the way we built it, and why we built it this way, and why we kind of stayed this course, and why we also ultimately think that there's a perfect way to collaborate with you guys, and hence the acquisition, is that our customers are going to become more and more sophisticated, yours and ours. The market is going to become more and more, let's say, unified, in the sense that whether you're in Mexico or the Philippines or in Australia, these processes are going to become pretty unified, standardized. And it really will be a game of who can do this the most effectively at the lowest cost. And the only way to get there is with AI, right? Because it's the actual collection space in and of itself, to an extent, has already been commoditized. So how do you actually compete? You compete on performance. And ultimately, you will still compete on performance, but as a business, you have to also do it profitably. And that's kind of the little bits and pieces to get where we are right now with my answer, is to say that you can't take a path towards AI if you really want to be first and foremost a data play, and remain relevant into what the next 10 years are going to be, right? Because I don't see as many resources and as much cost in collections, but I definitely see a significant bump in performance. The possibilities are there. And I think also ultimately the other side of the equation, the debtors themselves, right? You make their lives much easier as well by adding a ton of AI to what our platform does, right? Because it just facilitates getting the friction out of the whole value chain, and that's kind of where we went with this.
I think the one of the really interesting ability with AI inside of your platform, which I really like, is the fact that you can be selective about where you enter it into the process. Whereas I think the challenge you highlighted very well on the sort of do it all with AI process is you run up against regulator issues, you run up against like risk management frameworks with inside those organizations. Yep. They're like, I don't want this type of customer to be spoken to, right, by AI. But in Receive, it's like, hey, I want these comms to be sent out at 9 a.m., but these other comms, I want you to use AI to determine the time. And I think that's really powerful because you give those enterprise clients the flexibility they need to be able to say, this is where I'm comfortable to implement. Let's try and implement it there. And then let's build on from that point in time and go forward.
Exactly. And that's where also you train your own, you train the AI based on what the platform's doing, right? So you're basically learning as you go. And it allows you to leverage kind of what you already have, which is great because you don't necessarily have to go to the outside to get that benefit. And again, our platform continues to learn. And that's the best part. The algorithm is always evolving. And it can even tell you quasi where you should inject it, right? So your example of saying, I want to take this little component, the platform itself can tell you where you can become much more effective by letting the AI loose. Again, we're a little bit of a ways away from truly saying that this can be run 100% by an AI. But the one point that I didn't touch upon answering your previous question is the managed service part, right? Because if you really think about it, we've gotten to the point where we've almost realized that we're probably better at running the platform than some of our customers. And not because we're smarter or not because we know something more than our customers, just because we're working with it day to day.
And you use it all the time.
We can set it up, right? So we know how to actually set it up to really take advantage of the AI. And that's almost a quantum leap for some of our customers, right? Because you're then I like to use the example of mobile in Eastern Europe, right? They just skipped landlines in Eastern Europe and just went to mobile 15, 20 years ago, because why would you build out the landlines when you could just go right to mobile? And I think there's an inflection point coming in a lot of like these types of services business, not just collections, right? I mean, anything that's back office, like what they call the office of the CFO technology stack, right? That's where all of this quasi automation allows for a leap forward that just gets us out of the Excel days and into, truly kind of modern technology and real innovation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the piece you mentioned on the leap component, I think that's one of the things I see consistently as we compare market to market of like, for example, if I just think about our collect product, we see places like the UAE and parts of Latam where it's like they just jumped over SMS. Like you don't need SMS, you just went straight to WhatsApp. And then you've got sort of other countries like the US, it's like, okay, well, we know there's customers on WhatsApp. How do we go there? And it's like, well, go and look what's happening. Like you literally can't reset banking passwords in parts of the Middle East without literally using WhatsApp to do it. So I think you can take that learnings a lot. And I think that's to your point around the managed services piece is it allows you to also take learnings that you get across your entirety of your customer base and apply that. And I think, we've even seen this on a couple of the deals that we've worked on together where people, they want the platform, but they don't necessarily want to administer the platform. Like that's another job in its own right. And the agents might spend their time in a different part of the, it could be on a dialer, or it could be in the local CRM, like you mentioned, or the local system. So it's like, I need you to orchestrate this layer on top of it. I don't necessarily want to spend my time there. And I also think that becomes powerful in terms of distribution, because you mentioned this when Michael thought about that at the beginning. Trying to displace the entire system of record is a battle I don't think anyone, certainly not a venture capital backed battle. It's like, it's a 20, 30-year journey if you're going to get them off these systems. But those systems inherently have so many problems, right? Like I speak to large banks, particularly in Australia, constantly about the platforms of choice that they're on now. And it's like, they just run up against these issues. Like there's a 5-year roadmap and there's no Gen AI on it. And it's like, okay, well, we're all on this one collections product. It's still on-prem. It's going to get decommissioned at some point in time. We've got to move to the cloud, which is what everyone else did like 10 years ago. And so like the reality of getting Gen AI into the collections functions of the big four banks in Australia is not going to happen But now there's an interesting opportunity about putting Receive on top, which is like, okay, well, it can give you that layer and power, which I think is really, really cool. Switching tact a little bit, so to the actual sort of acquisition and I think what we're trying to do here. So, I think the audience is pretty familiar on the indebted side. We got our third party collect product. We're in 5, soon to be 6 and 7 markets and beyond. We've covered sort of Receive. I think I'll give my pitch, and I'm keen to get sort of your piece on this as well. Is we see the two businesses coming together over the next sort of I know the work's literally already happening now in the background, but certainly Q1 of next calendar year. We'll see, one brand, 2 products, Receive and Collect. We'll have obviously 2 targets for there. There'll be some clients we actually already have some, as we found during diligence, that use both of our products anyway, which is cool. And we'll want to see people be able to leverage both. But I think there are 2 distinct, probably sets of opportunities there. I think organizations that outsource and want to have an AI-enabled competitor on the third-party space, Collect will still continue to be that, and we'll want to obviously leverage your expertise and go into Europe and through Germany, and we'll announce more about that next year. But I think we have a huge amount of clients that come to Indebted today that we can't service because they want a platform, they want a managed service first-party solution, and now we want to obviously be able to have that with Receive. And I think the last piece that I'm still trying to work through, and I know you've got some views and you can touch on it in your part, which is there's also another whole segment of potential users or clients or buyers, if you will. You mentioned debt buyers. That's an interesting one. We work with a lot of the debt buyers. You've got some agencies, collection agencies as clients on your platform, which is also interesting and a conundrum for us to work through, and whether we want to enable our competitors, though I think we do actually, because I think there's a lot of validity in that. But I also see this extending into law firms in the US who need to digitize, particularly for the debt buyer client base that they have. And then there's also the e-commerce space, and I know you've got some clients in that area as well. So yeah, keen to just see how you see the integration and sort of segmentation of it moving forward. What you're excited about, and sort of what we're going to focus on together in 25.
Well, I mean, one of the things that you and I talked about a million times at this point, it feels like, is that we've both had the customers that could have used the other's product, right? So it's just exactly. I being inherently a salesperson, I was always quite frustrated where it was just like, oh man, if I could also offer the agency component, this would be great. And you mentioned to me that you had a bunch of customers that were looking more for a white label solution. And it's just like, I wish I was there in that conversation. So I think that, the simple answer is, I think the market just grows for both of us in terms of having access to each other's existing client base as well as pipelines. So I think that was one of the main drivers for us. I mean, we did hit some challenges in terms of growing the business, which I think we can very much address working together. And we can learn a ton from you guys with the background that you guys have on that side of the, let's say, collections equation. So that's one of the things that I think there's a ton of opportunity. Also the geographies, again, we went global from day one. I think we both have exposure to some overlapping geographies where I think that's also a way to throw together the experience that we both have and really take advantage of it. Also the networks that we've built. I think you guys, as well as us, we kind of know the key players. We know who to go after. We know what they want. In terms of who are we kind of going after, and you mentioned kind of the point, we started seeing a lot of inbound from the US from law firms. I mean, it's just it's a coincidence that you were bringing up law firms, and that's exactly where I would say in 2023 going into 2024, we started seeing appetite for that. So it was more of an inbound. We had a lot of law firms basically reaching out to us, looking at the demo, and we're close to closing some of those opportunities in the US. And I also think there's certain areas where, especially now if we go harder into the US market, where we definitely can get traction. And this is these, I'll say venture funded, but definitely growth stage businesses where I see the best opportunity, where they are willing to accept innovation. They want to have innovation. The US market is always willing to kind of adapt things faster and sooner. So I think that's, for us, the most exciting, let's say, growth area. It's all about the execution of making sure we get in front of the right people, and again, falling now back on the fact that we can combine our pipelines and resources. But I also think that there is, like, on the back of AI, I think there's going to be kind of more of a, let's say, collaboration and even growth together as companies when looking at, let's say, the managed service side of things, right? So that's where I think we actually bring the companies together closer, and Receive and Collect and really can overlap in that managed service like quasi area in between. And that's why I'm probably most excited about that, because for us, we just saw that push in that direction within the last 12 months, that customers were almost asking us for this. So we realized that the market wanted managed services the way we now have started offering it. But even our own customers, to an extent, were saying, hey, could you manage the platform for me? And our customer success, which we call professional services, was playing that role more and more. And we just said, look, this is something the market is really kind of aching for, and there's a gap there that we can fill. And if we can leverage Indebted as well, and we can even switch the model, I mean, again, all the customers obviously want to be paying based on performance. And my vision from day one of Receive was I wanted a product. I mean, I had two things that I wanted basically within 10 years of starting the company. One was that people would put on their CV the ability to work with Receive as a software platform, right? So like whatever you put your skill sets that, if you were in the collections world, you would put Receive. That was one of the things I always wanted to kind of establish with the platform. And then one of the other things was to ultimately be as performance oriented in my pricing. Because if you really think about it, that's the easiest way to show value. And our key metric when we sell to a customer is time to value. I want my customers to get on the platform and start seeing true value as fast as possible. And that's why we're going after certain geographies, certain segments. I mean, growth is probably the key word for the type of customer we're going after, because you want them to say, look, I'm growing at a clip that I just can't keep up with the resources. I don't want to spend on the back of that growth. So I want to do a technology play to keep myself as profitable as possible. So that's kind of how I think about it. I still think there's a lot to learn. I mean, I think, now that we've actually brought the companies together and we're going to continue on that path for the next couple of months, I think we're going to also see opportunities that we maybe don't even realize today are there. And I think once we start talking to customers together and really kind of putting or putting on or taking off, I mean, you putting on the Receive hat, me putting on an Indebted hat, and really kind of thinking through what the opportunity is, I still see a lot of little like kind of pockets where we could even grow more working together.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Paul, thanks for today. It was awesome to connect, and I know we've got a ton of work to do in 2025, but looking forward to working with you, Michael, and the rest of the team. It's going to be a fun year.
Same here. We've enjoyed everyone we've met so far, and really enjoying kind of getting integrated into Indebted. So on to 2025.
Awesome. Thank you.